Good morning, everyone. What a joy to have you once more being here, joining us for this Spiritist Talk series that is promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Today we have a very special guest, that our dear friend, Dr. Vicente Pessoa, and he will be discussing Abraham Lincoln, the man, the president, and mediumship. We have to remember that Abraham Lincoln is one of the most beloved American presidents, but we will leave everything to Vicente to talk and to enlighten us as to this great man, great spirit. And before we start, we always start with our prayer. But let's say first, good morning and welcome. Good afternoon, Vicente. It's so wonderful to have you here again with us.
Good afternoon to everyone in the United States and Europe, and good morning to everyone in Brazil. I'm very happy to be here, Jussara. Thank you very much for this chance, this opportunity, and I hope I am up to the mission.
Wow, I'm sure it will be wonderful. We are eager to hear you and to learn more. And in this particular day that we celebrate 213 years of the birth of Abraham Lincoln. So we ask everyone to connect with us, to join in minds and hearts, that we may receive the protection and guidance of the benefactors, and more in particular of this spirit, this man that we will be talking about today, Abraham Lincoln. May we feel his presence. May we send our warm vibrations to him and receive his in gratitude for everything that he has done and for the examples he left to us. We ask more in particular for guidance and protection for our speaker today, that he may be able to capture through the benefactors the inspiration and everything that can make this presentation even more special. And with that, we open our meeting, our presentation today. So before we continue, allow me to introduce Dr. Vicente more formally. Dr. Vicente Pessoa is an infectious disease physician and he's current vice president of the Spiritist Medical Association of Goiânia. Thank you again, Vicente, for being here with us. Everyone, please remember to send your questions or your comments. Maybe we will not have that many questions today, but your comments and appreciation words for this presentation. Now it is with you, Vicente. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jussara, once more. So it's a great pleasure to be here with you. I'm very happy to have this chance to talk about this great man, this great president. He is well known around the world. He's not important only to the United States, but we believe he has many admirers around the world. So he had a great impact in American life, in American politics, as we are going to see through the presentation. So I have an English as a second language, so I will try my best to be as clear as I can to try to explain some aspects of his life. And I strongly believe it's important for us to talk about his childhood, his career as a politician, his career as a lawyer, so we can understand how his character was built. All those adventures, all those dramas, all those knowledges that he acquired in his childhood, in his family life, in his wedding, they contributed a lot to build his character and the way uh, he behaved and his beliefs as well. So it's very important for us to reconsider those aspects during our talk. And by the end of the talk, we are going to talk about his relationship with some mediums and some spiritual phenomena. And I would like to make it clear that all those informations are written in books and letters that Lincoln wrote himself, letters that his son wrote, and letters that his friends also wrote. So they are all registered data, registered information. So it's very important for us to make that clear because we are not making up anything. So I would like to I had the desire to say that in the beginning of the talk because some people think maybe there are a lot of information about Lincoln's religious beliefs. Was he religious? Was he an atheist? What kind of religion did he follow? Did he actually follow some kind of religion? And what was his way of seeing life according to religious aspects? So that's what we are going to talk about. That, and some authors had exposed that if we could prove that Lincoln had spiritual experiences, contacted spirits, and that those spirits influenced his decisions as president, that would be a great achievement of the 21st century, right? Because that would be so revealing and such important for spiritualism and spiritism, that would be one of the most important achievements and information of the 21st century. The president used to say that he was always guided by voices. He has written letters about that, that sometimes he was feeling that his decisions were influenced by thoughts outside his head. And that's a very important information coming from the man himself, right? The president himself. And he had that written in letters to friends. And one of his friends, which was a congressman from the state of Illinois, Warren Chase, wrote in a letter that he knew and he had witnessed that the president was always being visited by mediums before he became president and after he became president in the White House. And he had the conviction that Lincoln had a religion and that he was a spiritist, that he was a Christian who believed in reincarnation and the laws of cause and effect, action and reaction, and in God and everything else. So we have a lot of information about that, and unfortunately, we don't have time to talk about every phenomena that Lincoln witnessed and participated, but we chose a few of them so we can discuss and talk about them, how important they were, and so on. So I would like to begin this talk after this brief introduction. I hope my English is good. With I will just change the first slide. So this is a picture of a sculpture, a statue of Lincoln. Everybody knows this statue. It is located at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. So this is a president so important that he has his own memorial, right? So this tells us how important this man was to the American people, to the country, and how he's beloved in America. At the beginning, when he was president, he was not beloved that much. He was not so admired because he was questioned. Some people even questioned his character, his decision power, the power to make decisions, right? Some people sometimes say that he had some doubts about what to do because he was so inexperienced as an executive leader. He had a brief experience as a politician. He was a congressman from Illinois, the state of Illinois, when he was younger. And he was a politics inside the state of Illinois. He did not have like that national expression, national knowledge. And he was growing a little bit. He was part of the old party, the Whigs. And after that, he became a Republican. And he was growing slowly inside the state of Illinois. So there is this statue of Lincoln, this beautiful statue at Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. And in the year 1965, in the 20th century, this statue was visited by our dear Brazilian medium, Francisco Cândido Xavier, our Chico Xavier. He was visiting the United States to meet people who were spiritists and to know the spiritist movement in the United States and help to spread information about spiritism in the United States. It was in 1965. And then Chico visited this memorial in Washington. And when he was in front of that statue, he felt a very strong emotion in his heart. And his guide, Emmanuel, just showed up beside him and said a few words that we would like to reproduce here. He said to Chico, take a close look at the inspiration that guided the artist to do or to make this beautiful statue of Abraham Lincoln. If you take a close look, Chico, you will notice that his right hand is opened. It is the hand he used to sign the declaration that set the slaves free. So the right hand is opened. And if you take a good look, you will notice that his left hand is closed. The left hand stands on the same side as our heart, the left side of the body. And from his look, you can feel how melancholic he seems to think about life and the situation. So, in order to fulfill his duty, it was needed that he closed his heart. So this is a very strong statement from Emmanuel, as Emmanuel tells that his look was telling us that in order to fulfill his duty, to set free the slaves, he needed to close his heart. Because you can imagine that for a good man, being a president for the first time, and had this mission to guide the country in a very severe war, a very violent war, with so many deaths, it was not easy. He had a duty to fulfill, a mission to accomplish. And the war was against everything he believed. So he had this conflict. And even though we believe that his main duty was to keep the Union together, he had this mission as a president to follow the Constitution and keep the Union together as one, and avoid that the United States were divided into different countries. The war, deep inside, was about slavery. Of course, there were so many other factors, so many other issues going on. We are not that naive to say that the war was exclusively about slavery, but slavery took a great weight in that war because the South was strongly associated with slavery, and as the North was kind of anti-slavery. I mean, we cannot say that everybody in the North was anti-slavery, but most people in the North were anti-slavery at that time. And in the South, it was the contrary. And people would have a lot of their profits would be diminished with the abolition of slavery, right? So there was a very complex conflict, and this man was just in the middle of that complex issue, and he had to fight not to betray his beliefs and to keep faithful to the Constitution and to the American people. So let's review a little bit about his life. So Abraham Lincoln, even though he was elected as a Republican from Illinois, he was born in the state of Kentucky on February 12th, which is today, in 1809. So today it is his 213th birthday. So that's why we're here talking about him. And he passed away in 1865. At that time in Europe, in 1857, the Spirits book was first published by Allan Kardec. So Abraham Lincoln died 8 years after the publication of the Spirit book. And he is 5 years younger than Allan Kardec, who was born in 1804. So things were happening at the same time in Europe and in the United States concerning the spiritual phenomena, which is very nice to observe because it goes together with the idea that the universality of the teaching of the spirits, right? It was happening all over the world at the same time with the same information, which is a great criteria for veracity, right? Allan Kardec explained that in his books. So he was born in Kentucky, and here we have a picture of his house, right? Of course, it's a replica of his house in Kentucky, where he spent part of his childhood with his parents, his father and his mother, and we're in his brothers and sisters. We're going to talk about them a little bit because the relationship he had with them influenced a lot his character, and we're going to talk about that a little bit on the next slides. And his parents were named Thomas and Nancy Lincoln. They were from Europe. They were the descendant from Europeans, and if I'm not mistaken, from Englishmen. And they were living in Kentucky, but they moved to Indiana, right? So this is a picture of his father and his mother, Thomas and Nancy Lincoln. We have a lot of different pictures of them, so I chose them because they are together in the same picture. We can see them. I'm not sure if he looks like them. I see on his face some characteristics of his mother, and of his father as well. So I think he's a mixed of both of them physically, and he was a very tall man. And when we talk about his physical aspect, he was a very tall man, and he used to walk like in a clumsy way. He had long arms, and this physical characteristic was used by his rivals, his political rivals, to criticize the way he talked, the way he moved, because in politics they use everything to criticize the opponent. But Lincoln did not do that, right? He was a good man, and we are going to talk about his greatest rival, Stephen Douglas, in a few minutes. So those are his parents. And in 1886, when Lincoln was around 7 years old, his family moved to the state of Indiana, where he lived until 21 years old. This movement was made because his father was seeking to new land, new farms. He was eager to accumulate land and farms, so he had to move to Indiana, where he thought he had more opportunities to accumulate land, and also because the state of Indiana at that time was a little bit more anti-slavery than the state of Kentucky at that time. So his parents were seeking to have a little bit more of peace at that state. And then Lincoln lived there in the state of Indiana until he was 21 years old. So his relationship with his father was not a very good one. I mean, it was not a bad relationship, but his father was not that model of a father that he would expect or he would want a father to be. And there are a lot of evidence of that in the literature, in the books, and there is this letter that Lincoln once wrote to a friend, where he says that owing to my father being left an orphan at the age of 6 years in poverty and in a new country, he became a wholly uneducated man, which I suppose is why I know so little of our family history. So this letter, Lincoln tries to bring the idea that he did not talk too much with his father about their family, about their antecedents from Europe. So in other moment of his life, he wrote somebody that God bless my mother. All that I am or ever hope to be, I owe to her. So he does not mention his father as a model to the construction and the building of his character. As we read his biographies, there was a kind of a conflict there, maybe a silent conflict, right? But there was. Lincoln was following his father frequently to church, and his father would not allow him to talk about the what he learned in church, to preach, right? To preach to other kids what he learned in church, because when he okay, so I was reading some messages here, so I lost a little bit of my focus. So when he visited the church with his father, he memorized what the priest was saying, and he loved to repeat that to other kids. So he studied the Bible since he was very young, and he used to use those parts of the Bible, those phrases, in his speeches, even as an adult, as president. He mentioned big parts of the Bible by heart. He had this great memory, and he loved to read, as we're going to see. And at other moment of his life, he would clearly say that his conflict with his father was around his passion, his love for books, for reading, and for studying and learning, because Lincoln was a very hungry reader. He loved to read everything, and he was a self-taught person. He would learn many things by himself, only by reading and researching, doing his own work on that subject. And his father was against that. His father wanted him to work, to take his axe and work with the woods and make money for a family. And Lincoln was not fond of that idea, even though he understood that he had to do that to help his family. So he had this conflict as well. I want to learn, I want to study, but I also have to work, and my father picks on me. And how should I deal with this situation? And he does not mention his father as a model and guide and example for him in his letter and his text. When his father passed away, when he was adult, he was not able to go to his funeral because he was traveling with his political campaign. So he missed his father's funeral, and he was not able to go visit his funeral. So there is this conflictuous relationship between his father and him, and also respectful, because they didn't fight like very hard. There was no mention of hate, just a conflict, right? They did not get along very well, with full of love, which is the opposite of his mother and his stepmother, because his mother died when he was very young. I believe he was 9 years old when his mother passed away. So this is pictures of Lincoln reading. So reading was present everywhere in his life, even when he was working with his axe, as we can see in the middle picture, and the picture in the corner, the big vertical picture. So he was an avid reader, avid learner. And we see that with many people through history, like, for example, Camille Flammarion was like that. The astronomer, the French astronomer Camille Flammarion was like that. Allan Kardec was like that. And Leon Denis was like that as well. So great men with great desire to learn, great passion to learn. And he was one of those men. I have no idea how he used to find time to read so much, because that time they didn't have cell phones, internet, and there are so many letters. They spent so many times writing letters to everyone and reading everything he could about English grammar, about astronomy, about politics, and even about war. He became a very good war strategist, because he could not question his generals during the Civil War, because his generals would tell him that he did not understand about war. So he changed that. He was studying about war strategies and war politics, and he became a very good specialist in war strategies, even sometimes surpassing his generals with his ideas and his capability of decision during the war. So he was very interested in knowledge, and we can see that through his whole life. He was always reading and learning, and that's very amazing for a man who went to school for the first time with 10 years old. He had to wait until he was 10 years old, and his teachers at Indiana would say that he would love to read, and there were not enough books in Indiana to end his hungerness for reading, right? So that's a very important trace of his character, the reading part. But through those readings, Lincoln was also reading things about moral, about ethics, and he was already building his character based on those moral books with a moral history as a main subject. And we compare that to the Good Samaritan in the Bible, which he knew by heart. That passage we can find in the Gospel of Luke, a very beautiful passage of the Bible, which is very well analyzed and studied by Emmanuel in his work. We can see many chapters of books of Emmanuel talking about different aspects of that passage about the Good Samaritan. And we can see that those moral books that Lincoln read when he was young really changed his character in the way he saw life. Because one day when he was a teenager, when he was living in Indiana, he was coming back home with a friend at night, and it was really cold. And actually, they saw something on the mud, and they at first they could not realize what it was. And when they got closer, they realized it was a man that had drunk so much. It was very drunk, and this man fell in this mud, and he was freezing and he was going to die. And him and his friend, actually him, because he was so big and so strong physically, he took his man on his shoulders and he carried that man to a safe and warm place. They built a fire, they feed the man, they gave the man water, and his friend went home, and Lincoln stayed with that man through the whole night. So he has his passage of the Good Samaritan in his life, like as a teenager. So this helps us understand his ideas and his behavior during the war, when he was face to face with the enemy soldiers that were captured by the Union, Confederate soldiers, and how merciful he was, and how he treated those people well, because he did not consider those Confederates as enemies. He considered them as brothers that were wrong in his ideas. And we have a lot of evidence of those situations in the text. So I'm going to read this one because I think it's very important for us to understand how Lincoln treated his enemies. I think this slide is a little bit out of configuration, but we can follow me if I read very slowly. So one day when Lincoln have heard that there was this teenager soldier which was in the Confederates army. He was only 16 years old, and he was going to be executed for treason. And then he wrote to the general, and his words were like, "I only ask you, my dear general, not to do anything in retaliation to the past. Do only what is necessary to ensure security in the future. And let me remind you that we are not fighting a foreign enemy, but our own brothers, and that our aim is not to destroy their spirit, but only to regain their former loyalty. Conquer by kindness. Let that be our policy." I mean, I have to ask this. Have you ever seen a commander-in-chief so merciful like that? Have you ever seen that in other conflicts, in other wars through human history? So he did not want to destroy or kill the enemy. He only wanted to reconquer their formal loyalty. So don't kill those men. So one day when he was visiting a nursery where his own soldiers were injured, and he went bed by bed, and he shook the hand of every one of his own soldiers and thanked them and gave them words of optimism and pride. And then he asked his generals what was going on in the other tent. And the general answered him, "Oh, you would not like to go there, because there we have the enemies, the soldiers that are our enemies, the injured soldiers that are our enemies." And then he promptly corrected his general. "They are not our enemies. They are the Confederates." So he went to that tent and he shook the hand of each and every one of the soldiers who were fighting on the other side. And he exchanged a few words with them, some kind words. So this is the man we are talking about, and it's very rare, this kind of forgiveness and mercifulness for the enemy during wartime. And one night at Washington, Lincoln was invited to a party, the high society of Washington, and he was with his wife, Mary Lincoln, and suddenly a lady came to him and asked, "How can you kindly refer to your enemies when in fact you should eliminate them?" And then he gave an answer that breaks everyone's legs. How can you go against a man that answers a question like that with those words? "Do I not eliminate them when I make them my friends?" So I have a story to tell that Chico Xavier said something very similar to that when he was talking about the spirits that were obsessing people. So he said that we had to be friends with our obsessors. because it's our chance to tell them about the gospel, to evangelize them, right? I'm not sure if there is this word, but to transform them. So this is what Lincoln thought, like 100 years before Chico said the same sentence, right? Concerning our spiritual enemies, we have to have them close to us so we can be the example. So this is amazing for a commander-in-chief. Actually, at least I think it's amazing, right? I think it's pretty amazing that we have such an important leader from such an important country facing such an important conflict to behave like that. So this shows the good of a man he is, and how he was engaged with his commitments, and what he believed was right, the right thing to do. He didn't love the war. He didn't want the war. He said that we're not going to fire the first shot unless they fire us first, and that's exactly what happened. The Union was attacked first, so he had to react in order to, as a commander-in-chief, to follow the Constitution and keep the Union together. So he brought with him a lot of suffering concerning this conflict. So many people dying. It was not unusual for his employees in the White House, his close friends, to see him walking late at night and very concerned that that night or that day 5,000 men had died, had lost their lives, 10,000 men had lost their life, and even more. So he was suffering the process of war. Of course, he was not a perfect man. He had his flaws, and everybody does. So, but at least he was a good man, right? A man that inspired us. And we love to talk about men and women who inspire us because we want to be like them, right? We want to get better. It's the same feeling that Jesus creates in our heart. We want to be like him. We want to love. We want to give from ourselves. And Lincoln was that kind of man. It was not unusual also people to write and tell that when they were next to him, talking to him, they could feel a lot of peace, a lot of wisdom, and it was a great pleasure to be around him. He was so funny. He had this dry humor that he used in his speeches with his opponents, and he was so clever and so smart, and he could talk about everything. And he had this great desire to make American people grow. And that's what we want from our politicians, right? And sometimes we don't know how heavy it is to be a president, how heavy this kind of work is, how much responsibility it brings with him, right? And we judge people's actions. And Chico Xavier used to say that we have to pray a lot for our governors, our mayors, our presidents, because it's so hard to be in such a powerful position and be the same person. You don't not to be changed by those powerful facilities that you have. So there was that man, that tall man, skinny man from Kentucky, who made his career as a lawyer in Illinois. He didn't went to college. He was a self-taught lawyer. He got his license as a self-taught lawyer, and he was very good at it, right? And then he became concerned about people's life, and he dived himself into this politics career, and he was not well known in the whole country, and he becomes to grow little by little. So that's very inspiring for us. So this is a picture of his ex, and he didn't want to work very much because he wanted free time to read, but actually he did work, right? He was a hard worker. He helped his father, and there is a sad story that even Lincoln was helping his father to build his mother's coffin with wood, because she passed away when he was very young in 1818. So he was 9 years old. I was correct before. And she passed away from a very weird and strange disease called milk sick. I had never heard about milk sick before as a physician, and I had to look what milk sick was, and I figured it out, like living and learning, right? That was a toxin present in a plant, and they used to make tea of this plant, and she was taking care of somebody that was suffering from milk sick, and she drank the tea as well. So Nancy Lincoln was his mother, and she had 3 children. Lincoln was the second one, Sarah, Abraham, and Thomas, and she died in 1818 from milk sick. She was diagnosed with it when she was nursing a neighbor who had it, and he was only 9 when she died, and he was a strong encourager of Abraham Lincoln's studies and reading. So maybe that's why he has these fond memories and this fond relationship with his mother, and also with his stepmother that we are going to meet in a while, because they were strong supporters of his studies activities. And as I said, he helped his father to build her coffin with wood with his axe. And the death of his mother had a strong impact in his life, right? He suffered a lot. This is a picture of her grave. People can visit her grave in the state of Kentucky. And this is a picture of the plant that has this toxin that killed his mother, right? So I was very curious about it, and I found it, the information. And as I said, living and learning, right? So then that brings us to his stepmother. His father was afraid to raise his children alone, so he went back from Indiana to Kentucky to find a new bride, and he found this lady, Sarah Bush, who later on became Sarah Bush Lincoln, who also had, who was a widow, and she also had 3 children, and they became together. And she took good care of Abraham Lincoln. She was very supportive of his readings. She used to help him with his clothes, and when he say good words about his mom, sometimes people don't know who he's talking about, his biological mom or his stepmother. And when Lincoln passed away, somebody went to her house and told her that Lincoln had been assassinated. And she said, she looked at the sky and she said, I knew he would never come back after his career in politics began. I knew that. I had that feeling in my heart. So they had a very good relationship, and they kept in touch for his entire life. So this is a picture or a painting of his stepmother, and this is a phrase that she wrote in a letter. I can say what scarcely one woman, a mother, can say in 1,000. And let me just find it in here so I can read it for you. I can say what scarcely one woman, a mother, can say in 1,000, and it is this: Abe, with it was his nickname, right? Never gave me a cross word or look, and never refused to do anything I requested him. So she recognized that he was a good man to her, and he also recognized that she was a good stepmother to him. And that brings us to that nickname Abe, right? So Lincoln is known for many nicknames: Father Abe and Honest Abe, which is the nickname I want to bring to our conversation, Honest Abe. And that's a very important nickname because it shows one more of his character traces, right? He was extremely honest man. There is a story that Lincoln walked miles and miles only to return to a client a few dimes, a few cents of coins because he had forgotten those coins in the store he was working at the time. And he had a small business when he was younger with a partner, and that business was not going very well, and they had to close the doors, but they had a lot to pay to his I don't know the word in English, right? Os fornecedores, right? He had a lot to pay to his the people who sold them the products they were selling, right? And he vendors, right? He had a lot to pay to his vendors, and he spent like many years paying them bit by bit until he could pay all his debt. And that's very important because some of his political rivals will note that aspect of Lincoln's life, and we are going to see that in a few minutes. Sometimes pain can be very useful to us in our life. So we have a lot of books in Spiritism talking about pain. It's not that we like pain, that we search pain, that we look for pain in our life. We don't do that. But when pain visits us, we have this desire to deal very well with pain and use it to our own growth. And that's what Lincoln did. He was a man shaped by pain. He was very poor during his childhood. He lost his mother. When he was 18 years old, his sister died giving birth to his nephew. He lost 2 sons. He had 4 sons with Mary Lincoln, and he lost 2 sons. He lost Edward and he lost William, or Willie. And William died when he was already a president, and that made him stay like for more than 7 days closed in his cabinet because he was so hurt and so much pain because Willie had passed away during his presidency, and he didn't know how to act, how to behave, and that was terrible, terrible times for the Lincolns in the White House. And his second son, Edward, was dead when he was 4 years old, probably by tuberculosis. It's the hypothesis at that time. And imagine losing 2 of your 4 sons, like at such a young age. And also because he was suffering because of the Civil War. When he came to the presidency as a first-time president, with not a lot of experience, and he had to deal with such a big conflict, such a big issue. And so those kinds of events were shaping his characters. And people used to say that he was always so melancholic, so sad. He had that sad look, that peaceful look, that sometimes he was looking at you, but he was very far away in his thoughts. And sometimes when we read that, we kind of reimagine and realize that maybe he was not from this world anyway. Maybe he was missing another world, another place where happiness was a reality for him, right? So we have this feeling, even though he had never written anything like that, but maybe he was from another planet, right? Who knows? So he was a man shaped by pain. And this is his great political rival in the state of Illinois, which is Stephen Douglas. Sorry, I didn't change the slide, but thank you for doing that. And this is a picture of young Lincoln running for Senate. And he was running against Stephen Douglas. And as I mentioned, his honesty came about in these debates because they organized a lot of debates in the state of Illinois, 8 debates, each one in a different city. So these debates would attract thousands and thousands of people, 15,000, 20,000 people to see Lincoln face to face against Douglas debating. They had like 1 hour for each one. Then they had a half an hour to answer each other And they did not have microphones at that time, so they had to speak really loud. And Lincoln showed on those debates how smart he was, how funny he was, his dry humor. He was very intelligent to use the words, to use the situations. And he actually lost that election for Douglas, who became a senator. But Douglas was very respectful of Lincoln. And he actually said, when he knew that the Republicans were choosing Lincoln to be his rival, he actually said, I shall have my hands full. I will have a lot of work to beat him. I shall have my hands full. He is the strong man of the party, full of wit, facts. Let me make it bigger because I shall have my hands full. He is the strong man of the party, full of wit, facts, dates, and the best stump speaker, with his droll ways and dry jokes in the West. He is as honest as he is shrewd or smart or anything like that. So you see that Stephen Douglas recognized that Lincoln was an honest man. He could not attack Lincoln, attacking his honesty, because it was impossible. He was the honest man alive. And that's what we want from our politicians. And Lincoln said at that debate was strictly around slavery. Lincoln was attached to the Declaration of the Independence that said that all men should be raised equal, should have the same rights. And he kept saying that, and Douglas was in favor of slavery. And deep inside, those debates were about slavery, right? And Lincoln said, there is no reason in the world why the Negro is not entitled to all the natural rights enumerated in the Declaration of Independence, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I hold that he is as much entitled to these as the white man. The question of slavery at the present day should be not only the greatest question, but very nearly the sole question. That was his campaign talk. It was turning around those phrases, those sentences, and it's funny because this sentence brings me a question, brings me a memory of also the French astronomer Camille Flammarion, when he said something similar but about immortality. That should be the only question. Do we live or do we not live after our body dies? That should be the only question we have to answer, and we have to concentrate our knowledge, our strength to answer those questions, because those questions are capable of changing our lives. So at that moment in Lincoln's life, slavery was able to change people's life. And as immortality is able to change our lives, because change the way we look at life, the way we behave, since we know we are going to be forever, since we know there is a law of action and reaction, and since we know God is perfect in his resolutions. So that changes your life. You give priority to other things in life. So slavery at that moment was the biggest issue of all. And Lincoln was, from that moment, already fighting slavery. And some people say that he was not actually favoring the slaves, because some people say that he was actually favoring the Union. He wanted to keep the country as one. And in order to do that, he understood he had to free the slaves. But his sentences tell us otherwise. So, in his life, there was otherwise. I believe that he really believed that all men should be raised equal and have the right to pursue happiness and be free. I really believe that after everything I read about him. So On the next one, we are going to say so let just me localize here my slides. So those debates were very famous, and Lincoln lost. So Douglas was made senator, and Lincoln was not made senator. But later on, he ran for president. He was selected from the Republican Party to be running for presidency, and he won. Right? It was a surprise, actually, that he won. But now I'm going to change the direction of this talk to the religion aspects of Lincoln's life, and we are going to talk about mediumship and everything else. So I think I still have free time to do that, right? So I think I still have like at least 20 minutes, right, to talk. So let's do that. So was Lincoln religious? Did he have a religion? So we have reports that he was already being visited by mediums and watching physical phenomena in before he was president, and he had this very strong sentence, this very strong saying that also shows that he was never attached or linked to any religion in particular, but also showed how good of a man he was. I will never join any church, as I find it difficult to admit without mental reservations the long, complicated statements that characterize the articles and professions of faith of Orthodox Christian doctrine. When a church inscribes on its altar as the only qualification for membership of its members the synthesis of the law and the gospel offered by Jesus, love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind, and your neighbor as yourself, this church I will join with all my heart and with all my soul. So he was not concerned to be classified as a Catholic, as a Protestant, or spiritist. He wanted to follow the good. He wanted to follow love. And that's a trace of good men. We also see that in Mahatma Gandhi as well. He was interested in good, in doing good to people, in helping people. And he met this little lady called Nettie Colburn Minard, who later would write, we can just, the next slide, please. I'm forgetting to pass my slide, so I'm sorry for that. So he met this lady, Nettie Colburn Minard, who later wrote a book, Was Abraham Lincoln a Spiritist? You can find that book in English and in Portuguese. We're going to talk about that book in a few minutes. So he met that lady who was a medium, and her story is very similar to the story of the Fox sisters. When she was a child, she would hear and listen to these noises, strange noises at her house, and they didn't know exactly what they were. And later on, she would fall in a deep trance and say things that she was not able to say with her own knowledge. And she could not remember what she had said, and people had to tell her, you said this, and that. And they figured that he was under the influence of other intelligences, other minds, and they began to read about that and study about that, and they understood that she was a channel between people who were dead and the living ones. And then that became very natural to her. She was invited to many people's houses to make those sessions and talk with them, influenced by the spirits. Arthur Conan Doyle, the great writer from the British people, he used to call her the Joan of Arc from the Spiritists, because she was so prophetic in what she was saying. And one day, in one of those meetings in somebody's house, she was in this trance, And the spirit said that she had to go to Washington, D.C. to talk to the president in order to tell him he had this mission to free the slaves. And when people told her about that, she could not believe that, because how could I have access to the president? I have not, I don't know anybody in Washington, D.C. I don't live in Washington, D.C. I live in Connecticut. And she forgot about that. Time passed and she completely forgot about that. It was 1862. Lincoln was already president. He became president in 1861. And then one day, her brother was in the army of the Union. He was a soldier of Lincoln's army, and he was hurt. He had a severe injury, and he needed a license to go home. And the doctors at the army were not giving him this license for bureaucratic reasons. It was taking so long. And then she talked to friends, and she decided to go to Washington, D.C. to visit the Department of War to try to fight for a license for her brother. And then that's when and how and where the spirits make their move and take their chances to put the two characters together, right? So one night she was invited to a meeting at some lady's house. And when she gets there, one of the guests was Mrs. Lincoln, Mrs. Mary Lincoln, Lincoln's wife. And at that meeting, she was entranced and she talked about many things. And Mrs. Lincoln was very impressed. And Mrs. Lincoln asked her later what she was doing in Washington, D.C., and she told her story about her brother, and that she was going back home because she was not able to solve her brother's question. And then Mrs. Lincoln made arrangements for her to stay a few more days at Washington and helped her with her license for her brother, and asked her to stay a few more days in Washington, D.C. And then on the next day, Nettie Colbert Miner get a note from the White House inviting her to go to the White House. And we can see a lot of pictures and drawings, as we can see in this slide, of her with the president in the White House. And then I would like to bring you 2 episodes where she met Abraham Lincoln. I will bring you the first and the second time they were together. I will not bring all the episodes because there are so many, and it would take us forever to describe everything. But the first 2 episodes were very important because in the first of them, they talked about slavery. And in the second of them, they talked about the Civil War. So those were 2 great questions on Lincoln's life. So that's why I chose those first encounters, those first meetings. So in the first encounter, she was at the White House, and Mr. Lincoln, the president, was not there at that room, but Mrs. Lincoln was there. And then there was this lady that was playing the piano, and that lady closed her eyes, and she was talking the piano so smoothly and so fast that lady had the sensation and the impression that he was not playing by herself. And she was playing so beautifully that when they looked at the door, there was the president standing still at the door. And he greeted everybody and said that he was passing by, and he could not resist the music because the music was so beautiful. And then he walked through that room in the direction of Nettie, who was standing beside Mrs. Mary Lincoln. And then Mrs. Mary Lincoln introduced Nettie to the president. And then he, smiling very gracefully and very politely to her, he said, "So, you are the little Nettie who is able to do such marvelous things, right?" And then she said, "Yes, I guess so." And then they started to talk. And then Mr. Lincoln asked her how she used to do those things. And she was with difficult to answer the questions because she was so shy and impressed to be in front of the president that a friend began to answer the questions for her. And that's the last thing she remembers, because she got in a deep trance after the president asked, "How do you do that?" And her friend was answering the question, and she fell asleep, and she began to talk to the president about slavery, and it was not her, of course. And that's what we have written about that meeting, the first meeting. For more than an hour, the spiritual entities spoke with the president, and later I learned from the narrative of my friends that he seemed to understand the issues raised very well, while they themselves understood very little. The people around were not understanding what was going on in the conversation, but Lincoln knew what the spirit was talking about. Until abruptly and emphatically, the spirits addressed the issue of the Emancipatory Proclamation. He must, both tactfully and sternly, maintain the terms in which the letter of liberation of the slaves was drawn up, and not delay the signing and publication of the decree that made it into law. This should be done before the start of the new year. And actually, it was done in January 1st, 1863. So this is a very strong statement by this book and in this sentence. He was also informed that this would be the biggest event in his administration and his life. Although he was being coerced and by powerful political factions to postpone his signature in the hope of nullifying it by various ruses or delaying his action, it was up to him prudently not to yield to such pressures, but to remain firm in his convictions and execute his work without fear, fulfilling the mission for which he was sent by an omnipotent providence. Whoa, he had a mission sent by God to do that task. And Lincoln recognized the voice as being the voice and the aspects of Daniel Webster, which was a congressman that served in Washington and that had postponed those subjects when he was a congressman, and he regretted a lot. So Daniel Webster was there talking to Lincoln about the importance of that issue to set free the slaves. And then people began to ask Lincoln, when Nettie wake up from the trance, about, was that true? Was he suffering pressure? Was he suffering political pressure from opponents who wanted to postpone the declaration? And then the president answers, "Since we are among friends, and in these obvious circumstances, I must say that the question is entirely pertinent. I rack my nerves and drain my strength to resist this pressure." And then he turned his attention to Nettie, to the medium, and he said, "My girl, you are gifted with a faculty as rare as it is singular. But that is from God. I have not the slightest doubt. I thank you for being here tonight. What happened here is more important than perhaps any of the people present can understand. I must go now, but I hope to see you again." And those were his words to her. And actually, he saw her again. That was the second meeting. And that's a very, very curious meeting and very interesting meeting, as we shall see. So Nettie was invited to a house in Georgetown in order to make those spirit session. And it was Mrs. Lincoln that organize this meeting in some friend's house in Georgetown. And before she was there, Mrs. Lincoln, Nettie was already there, and she got in a deep trance, and a spirit said he wanted to talk with the brave big man. This spirit usually referred to Lincoln as the brave big man. And that's a funny story because Lincoln was not supposed to go to that meeting. Mrs. Lincoln was preparing to leave the White House to go to that meeting, and Lincoln was just leaving his cabinet, and he asked her, where are you going? And she said, I'm going to watch a spiritist session at Georgetown. And then he said, wait for me, I want to go along with you. And then he took his hat and his coat, and they went together. And when they arrived there, the host said, welcome, Mr. President. You were being waited here. And then he asked, how? I just decided to come 5 minutes ago. How I was being waited here? Because the spirit said that you were supposed to come here. And he was very impressed. And then he met Nettie again, this medium. And Nettie, when she was in front of the president at the second time, she asked him if he could give her 1 minute of his time by the end of the meeting, because she wanted to ask him to intervene for his brother, because the intervention that we saw before was not helpful. And that was her purpose, asking the president that question. And the president answered, yes, sure, of course, I will give you 1 minute, but is there anything else you want to tell me tonight? And then she said, actually, I don't, but maybe other people would like to tell you a few words. And then she got in this deep trance again, and she started to talk to him about the troops in the front. And the spirit told him that the situation in the front was very precarious, like very fragile. And the president had to go to the front to visit the troops in order to give them this injection of optimism, of courage, in order to give them this example. And he should travel with a few people, under-noticed, only with his wife, his children, and a few more people. If, in case he did that, the war would be won. The troops would be revigorated. So Lincoln's answer to that quest was, so it will be done. And here we see the picture of Lincoln in the front with the soldiers. And that was a turnaround in the war. And they actually won the war. And that was very important. So two of the most important aspects of his presidency, the slavery and the Civil War, had direct influence from his encounters, his meetings with this lady. So Lincoln had the dream one day that he left his body and he was walking through the alleys of the White House, and he was hearing those people crying and crying very strongly, and he could not see the people who were crying. And then he entered the room and he saw a body in a coffin surrounded by soldiers. And then he asked for those soldiers, what happened? Who is dead? And then the soldier answered him, the president was assassinated. And he told these dreams to Mary Lincoln, his wife, and a few friends, and they were very impressed. Mary was very impressed. Lincoln had this, I would say this word, but I'm not sure if it's exactly what it was, but he has this obsession with dreams. He knew all the Bible's passages that were referred to dreams. And he dreamed that the president was going to be assassinated, and he was very sad about it because he was the president. So he kind of felt that something was going to happen. He also had other dreams in the past where he was visited by angels, and the angels used to tell him that he has this duty and this mission to free the slaves. So this is a kind of mediumship. So we studied that in Spiritism, that this is a kind of mediumship. He was very sensible to dreams. And this is a picture of his funeral. That's the body in the coffin, surrounded by soldiers, in the same room, the Orient room, that he had the dream. So that was very prophetic from his part, and he kind of realized, and some people say that maybe he really realized he was gonna be assassinated, right? And strangely as it could sound, maybe he was okay with that, because he deep inside he knew that maybe his mission was to free the slaves and end the civil war. And on the day that he was assassinated, he got the good news that the war was over. His opponents took the white flag, and they were negotiating the redemption, right? The surrender. They were negotiating the surrender, and he was very happy. He even told Mary Lincoln that he had this great desire to visit Jerusalem. See how the Bible and religion was strong in his life. He liked those stories. He knew them by heart. And then he went to the theater. And then a man came from behind. He had no chance to defend himself. So there we can see in the picture, there are a lot of drawings and paintings about that. And he shot him from behind. And then it was at night. And he passed away on the next morning, around 7 o'clock in the morning, at his bed, as we can see in the picture as well. And there it is. The president who set free the slaves were assassinated as he predicted. I would like to show you a couple more slides and to end our conversation, our talk. As I said, there are a lot of things to talk about when we talk about Lincoln, but we don't have enough time. I think that's okay. That's okay. People can learn and search for themselves as well. So I would like to show you this picture. And this is a very interesting painting because it was painting under the influence of the Caldwell brothers, who were very well-known mediums in the 19th century in the United States. And this painting was examined by technicians and people who were specialized in paintings, and they could not find any trace of brush in the canvas. So they don't know how this painting was done. Actually, this painting was done in the dark. The mediums were present, and they left paints of all colors around the canvas. And in the complete dark room, when they turn on the lights, there was this painting, and it was really hot. You could touch it. It was really hot. And nobody knows how it was painted. We call it painting by precipitation. That's how they describe it. And it is located in a hotel. Maybe we can, I don't remember the name of that hotel right now, but we can check it out in the book. And that was very impressive. And we can see a very peaceful Abraham Lincoln. So this was a mediunic phenomena related to Lincoln, a painting by precipitation of his portrait, right? And also, my relationship with Lincoln began a long time ago. I talked to Jusara about that, and that's why she invited me to be here talking about Lincoln, because we realized that we both like him very much as a man, as a president, and as a religious man. And when I was, I'm not going to tell you my age, but in 2013, I decided I had to take drawing lessons. and then I was learning how to draw an eye and mouth, and then I had to choose a picture of somebody to draw my first face, and I chose a lady, a young lady, and I draw my first face from that young lady, and then I had to draw a second face, and I was wondering who could I choose to draw, and then I found this picture, this colorful picture of Lincoln, and I went to a place here in my town, and I printed it in black and white because I was drawing in black and white. And then I suddenly began to draw this picture, and here I show you step by step how I I I I, I progressed through the drawing and the final result, and I was pretty marveled at myself because I never again could draw anything like that in that way. So this is my drawing of Lincoln, which I am very proud of, and I have no idea why I picked Lincoln. And now I understand why, because maybe in the future, the roads, my road and Jussara's roads, were gonna be together on this uh, presentation here, and this prize for this man, which was really a good man, and who fulfilled his duty very well. So for those interested, I would like to recommend the reading of these books. The first ones on the top are in Portuguese, and I believe they are the same book, actually. Sessões Espíritas na Casa Branca and Abraham Lincoln Era Espírita. I believe they are the same book with different versions. And this book exists in English. Was Abraham Lincoln a Spiritist? There, reading those books, you will find all those reports that I brought you and many others about Lincoln's relationship with the spirits and mediumship. So why people don't talk about that? I don't know. Maybe because if Lincoln had declared that he took advice from spiritists to decide such important things about slavery and the war, maybe he would be considered crazy and arrested. And on the other hand, we cannot deny that he had contact with those mediums and was strongly influenced by those meetings. So I hope my English was understandable, and I am very thankful for this opportunity to be here, and I thank you all for your attention.
Oh, what can you say, Vicente? That was an incredible presentation. I think a few, that's quite a few considering Lincoln. You managed to give us such a broad overview about him, his childhood, his thoughts, his endeavors, the hurdles he had to go through, all of especially during his first years of life, childhood, adolescence, and the challenges to pursue a political career, and actually his openness. Today, I'm sure we would say that he was a very spiritual person, not necessarily following this or that religion, because the religions even today are too small in a way to encompass the grandiosity of this mind. I remember once reading a book about him that it talked about his melancholy, and I remember, from the author's perspective, even trying to hand this as being perhaps a psychological problem or so. But in the Gospel according to Spiritism, we have an item that is in chapter 5, item 25, that talks about melancholy, that says the spirit, Francois de Genève, he says that, do you know why a vague sadness sometimes weighs upon your hearts and make you find life so bitter? It is your spirit which aspires to happiness and freedom, and which bound to the body that serves as its prison, exhausts itself in vain efforts to escape. So from everything that you presented, we can see that, I mean, this was too little for such a grandiose spirit as Abraham Lincoln. And to me in particular, as you said, I also have a connection with him since I was a child. I have no idea why I was there in Brazil. And this man was, like you said, big, different, and all of this. But it was always one of the people from history that attracted me the most. Little did I know that later on I would be living here, that our Spiritist group of New York is actually, receives his protection in all this country, according to the words of Divaldo Franco, that also receives all the protection and benefit and the presence, the spiritual presence of this benefactor that is Abraham Lincoln. We have a few comments. Well, everyone is just saying so many beautiful words, like Paula put it here, that Vicente, for such a thank you for such a wonderful, informational, interesting lesson in history. In 1 hour, I learned more than in 40 years of high school. You spoke well, and I appreciate your time you spent with us. We had Sally from Mauritius as well, and also saying that your English was very, very good, so no need to worry about it. And the informative presentation. The question that Luis presented, I do believe you already answered when you gave some references in terms of where we can find literature. In fact, one of the things that we learned, that apart from Jesus, Lincoln is the ones that have more biographies written or books written about a single individual. There are some that will say that it can be Napoleon, but I actually went to the house of Lincoln in Illinois, and there the information we have that they actually, apart from Jesus, he is the one that we have more books. So this is going to be an incredible journey, to go through all of them. And we have a question from Daniel. He says, excellent presentation, Vicente. Do you have any information about Lincoln's works in the spiritual realms nowadays?
Actually, I don't. I've never heard about him bringing any message from the spirit world. What we had in those books that I searched and those books that I showed were some pictures that were taken from his wife, where you can see him behind her. So I did not show those pictures because I was afraid what conclusions people could take about that, because sometimes, which is true, Jussara, we have to say that sometimes we have fraud in the Spiritism, and that happened since the beginning of the information, and I was not sure if they were real, if they were really examined and so on. So I did not bring those pictures. But I have no idea about what Lincoln is doing right now, if he is in the spirit world or if he had reincarnated, if he is in this planet. I have no idea. Actually, I am very curious about it. If somebody have has that information, please let me know, because I would love to know what Lincoln is about right now.
From what we know of here, Vicente, for many years we thought that Benjamin Franklin was the one that was in charge of the spiritual, more, in charge of the spiritual involvement of this country. Always, knowing that Abraham Lincoln was very present as well. But a few years ago, Divaldo Franco, in a spontaneous conversation, mentioned to some of us that actually it is Abraham Lincoln. Of course, Benjamin Franklin is very active as well, and other names like Thomas Edison and so many others, but he implied that actually is Abraham Lincoln. I myself received a communication from him many years ago, and it was a very beautiful communication where he even used some terminology that would say that now he was engaged in, referring to his life on matter in the freedom of the spirit, so in the liberation of the spiritual aspects of life, and many others here in the U.S. have been having this more direct approach with him. So, but like I said, this is totally and. But we are sure that he is very, very involved here in this work that we are doing, connecting with all the spirits that we know that have been working in this area to liberate us all over the world. Yes, go ahead.
I have the book that I showed here, one of them, right? It's in Portuguese, right? And it's published by Editora O Clarim, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe they have that newer version who has Lincoln on the front page. Mm-hmm. But what I would like to point is that by the end of the book, they have small chapters about the relation of other presidents with mediumship and with spirits. So we have George Washington, Ben Franklin, Roosevelt, and many other presidents, and they briefly talk about their relationship with mediumship and the spirits. So I guess that was pretty common, right? Truman and so on. So it's worth reading this book, right? The very instructive book on how especially Lincoln and all the other presidents were guided by those kind of information.
Yeah, the in English is Spiritist Sessions in the White House. I think this is the title for those who would like to look for this into English. And we have the comment from Yasko. Hi, Vicente. Very good talk. Lincoln, being contemporary of Kardec and avid for information and eager to communicate by letters, as you said, did he communicate with Kardec?
Well, I have no knowledge of that. It would be very inspiring, and I'd love to see a letter between Lincoln and Kardec, but I had not found anything like that. I have found a letter between Flammarion, the French astronomer, and our emperor Don Pedro II, right? They exchanged letters. That's well known, but I would love to see a letter exchanged between Kardec and Lincoln, but I have no knowledge of that.
Yeah, I don't too. I don't have this understanding. But one thing that we know, and that we learn here when studying the all the spiritual way of life, and starting in March 31st, 1848, that one of the things that actually wind up promoting even more the whole aspect of spirit communication and immortality was actually the war. So if in one way, like you were saying, it pained him so much, right, to have to engage, or to know that the brothers and sisters were going to be engaged in war for, in order for goodness to prevail. On the other hand, especially the mothers, like it's the case of Mary Todd, having lost their husbands, their sons during the war, they were the ones that gave a little bit more of a boost in terms of looking for mediums and a way of being reassured that life continued. So even from something that pained Abraham Lincoln so much, something also, another thing, of course, besides the liberation of slaves, was that it promoted even more the knowledge and the search for spirit communication. The name of the book is Mediumship. Do you have it here? The seances in the White House. I think it's or.
I will make a comment about the book, the name of the book, since people are asking. Actually,
Yeah.
There are two books, and they are in one, two in one. Does that make sense? Yeah, combined in one. One book was written by Nettie Colburn Miner, which was that lady, the medium, and this book is called "Was Lincoln?" I have the picture here in my slides.
Spiritualist. Yes.
Was Abraham Lincoln a spiritualist? Is that one on the lower part of the slide? Was Abraham Lincoln a spiritualist? This is one book. It was written by her. And this book is inside the book Sessões Espíritas na Casa Branca, which was written by Wallace Leal Rodrigues. So he combined the things that he wrote with her book, right? So he brings more information, and her book is inside this book. That's why I think those books on the top are the same one. Abraham Lincoln Era Espírita, because the comments are made by Wallace Leal Rodrigues. So I think Sessões Espíritas na Casa Branca and Abraham Lincoln Era Espírita are the same book. So I hope, Adriana, I made myself clear, right? So if you buy this book, you're going to read Was Abraham Lincoln a Spiritualist? Because it's inside here, okay?
I'm looking here in the White House. So let's see if I can find it. Because we can look at this later. So yes. But we already have at least the name of this other one, that other book from Nettie, and like I told you, there are thousands and thousands of books about Lincoln, not specifically talking about his spiritist encounters, but about other aspects of his life. So Vicente, that was really very inspiring. I know that you worked very hard in your research to bring this presentation, and also accepted the challenge to have to speak in a different language, which is not as easy for us who are not native in the language, and using spiritist terminology. That it's another issue. And we are very, very grateful to you. It was highly appreciate it, and I think you really made Lincoln very proud today with your work and with this remembrance, and happy with the remembrance that we are all having here with this opportunity to thank him for everything he did in life on earth and now life as a spirit. So if you have any final remarks before we close, please, I don't know if you have any final remarks that you would like to say. Or
No, I just would like to thank you again for this opportunity. It was very important for me personally. I spent the month of December, the whole month of December, researching and reading, and it was very important for me personally. And I would like to wish Mr. Lincoln a very happy birthday.
that's wonderful. And before we end our presentation, let's remember, first of all, thank everyone for that. We stay tuned with us. And remember that tomorrow we will have, we have started this course, Initiation into Spiritism. Tomorrow is going to be our fourth lesson. Is to Beatriz Lopez is going to be giving this talk to us about love of God and neighbor, where she's also going to mention the parable of Good Samaritan. And so it's for each and everyone. The following week, next Saturday, February 19, we will have our friend Humberto Schubert, which is a philosopher. He's going to be talking about freedom of conscience. So stay connected with us tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and next Saturday again at 11. And with that, we would like to say our final prayer. And of course, this prayer can only be of gratitude for all the blessings we are receiving, for all the many dedicated people, guest speakers that have been accepting generously our invitation, our challenges, even to bring to us more knowledge, more understanding, expanding not only, us in terms of intellectual values, but above all, to make it flourish even more this inner desire that we all have for spirituality. We thank our Heavenly Creator, all the good spirits that have been working, helping and assisting us. And today in particular, we thank our dear friend, Dr. Vicente, for this beautiful presentation, and our benefactor, Abraham Lincoln. Happy birthday. You are forever in our hearts. Thank you.